Hey guys, tonight we slip into the smoke-thick shadows of a time when getting high didn't mean edibles or vape pens. It meant wandering through incense-choked chapels, breathing in sacred herbs, and sometimes accidentally or not taking a cosmic leap into other realms. You'll sit beside monks who burn henbane for clarity, and peasants who light wild herbs to keep out the evil eye, though the way their eyes glaze over, you start to wonder who's keeping whom out. You'll find out why sometimes prayer felt like floating. And yes, like most of history, if you try any of this at home, you probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing who's drifting off with us all over the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a damp stone cell. No, not jail. You're a guest, sort of in a Benedictine monastery tucked into a hillside somewhere in 13th century France. You smell smoke already. A bell has rung for matins, the first prayer before dawn. Outside the arched window, the stars still blink, but inside something earthy and sweet is curling through the air. You follow it. The chapel glows with candlelight and gold thread. Robed figures sway in silent rhythm. A monk swings a heavy thurible and ornate incense burner back and forth. Trails of smoke rise in thin blue ropes. The smell is sharp, not just frankincense. You catch something else, something faintly bitter, almost narcotic. Henbane. This common herb shows up in monastery gardens across Europe. Historians still argue whether it was used purely for healing or to enhance visions. What's certain is that it dulls pain messes with your motor skills, and if burned in closed spaces like this one, makes chanting feel a little floaty. Your eyelids dip. The stained glass looks brighter. Later you pass the herbarium. Bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling beams like upside-down witches. Monk apothecaries spent centuries perfecting the art of smoke medicine, a blend of ritual botany and a dash of experimental courage. Peasants too burned herbs, not for liturgy but for survival. Imagine a straw-roofed hut on the edge of a village. There's no glass in the windows, just wooden shutters. Smoke seeps out of every crack. Inside, someone's burning mugwort rue or vervain, depending on what's wrong. Illness, bad dreams, or maybe just a bad harvest. The line between healing and hallucinating was thinner than parchment. Sometimes entire homes were fumigated. If you were sick, the healer might toss herbs on a brazier, cover you with a blanket, and trap you in with the smoke. Some called it cleansing. Others called it spiritual armor. You call it weirdly relaxing until your hands start tingling. Here's the twist. A lot of these smoky substances weren't just about what they did to your body, but what they were thought to invite. Inhalation brought you closer to the spirit world, or to demons, or both. Quirky tidbit time. In Eastern Europe, there were cases where people burned dried toad skins. Yep. Frogs caught and dried in the sun, then smoked like magical cigars. Why? To communicate with spirits, or just to see what happened? Either way, ribbit. Back at the monastery, you sit with a novice monk who confesses he once saw St. Peter standing in the smoke. He had golden keys and smelled like lavender. The monk insists it was a miracle, but he also hadn't eaten in 3 days and was treating a toothache with belladonna drops. Coincidence, historians still argue. One thing's clear, from noblemen to nuns, everyone had a reason to light something on fire. And while modern medicine likes tidy lines between spiritual, medical, and recreational medieval folks, saw no need for those boundaries. You watch a nun lift a censer and mutter a Latin verse. The smoke rises like a staircase. You breathe it in. For a moment, it doesn't matter whether you're blessing the air or getting buzzed. The veil between worlds feels a little thinner either way. The ointment looks harmless enough. A soft gray lump in a wooden bowl, speckled with herbs, and glistening like someone's old hand cream. You're sitting on a low stool in a dark cottage, the air heavy with beeswax and crushed lavender. Across from you, the old woman dips 2 fingers into the paste and grins. "You rub it here," she says, patting her inner thigh. "Helps with flying." You laugh. She doesn't. Welcome to the world of the witch's flying ointment. A sticky botanical cocktail that might just be the closest thing to medieval psychedelia. Its ingredients, a grab bag of nightshade family plants like belladonna, mandrake, henbane, and datura, each with its own resume of dizziness, hallucinations, and near-death experiences. You've heard of witches flying on broomsticks, right? Here's the twist. The broom might not have been literal. Some scholars suggest it was the applicator. Because when you slather this toxic balm onto mucous membranes, well, let's just say things get trippy real fast. You hesitate. She watches. And then because why not you dab a little on your inner wrist? Just a bit. Within minutes, the room feels too small. The candlelight shimmers like water. You blink and her thatched roof vanishes into open sky. You're floating, not soaring, but drifting weightless like your bones are hollow reeds. In the distance, you hear music, pipes, and drums, the kind they say spirits dance to, or devils, or both. Historians still argue whether these ointments were meant for actual flight spiritual journeys, or just wild hallucinations from lonely women with botanical know-how and a lot of free time. And here's the quirky bit. Some recipes claim to call forth a spirit goat named Hern, or the Black Man, who'd ferry you to secret Sabbaths in the forest. Whether you believed in the goat or not, one thing was sure: this stuff worked. It wasn't just peasants or midwives. Wealthier folk played with potions, too. Think of an Italian noblewoman bored in her stone villa consulting a cunning woman for love magic. A few drops of a belladonna tincture in her wine, and suddenly she's convinced Venus herself has arrived to advise her in matters of the heart. The line between romance and delirium was paper thin. And yes, this got people in trouble. Church records across Europe are littered with confessions. Some coerced, many confused, of women claiming they flew to mountaintops, danced with fauns, and saw fields full of silver fruit. Was it heresy, mental illness, drug-induced ecstasy, probably a blend? You start to feel a little queasy. That's normal. One 15th century healer warned to take but a bean-sized dab lest the soul slip free entirely. That soul-slipping bit, not metaphor. There are accounts of people applying too much ointment and falling into coma-like trances for hours, or never waking at all. But the high, if you got it right, was legendary. A floating dream untouched by time or pain, where colors pulsed and spirits whispered old truths. It was the medieval version of astral projection, plus maybe a dash of full-body paralysis. The room returns slowly. First the floor, then the walls. The old woman watches you carefully, as if measuring your pulse from across the fire. You blink a few times. The air smells stronger now, like crushed ivy and burning leaves. And you understand something. For many, this wasn't about escape. It was access. The ointment let them slip past the boundaries of their locked-down, church-approved lives and glimpse something stranger, freer, frightening sometimes, but never boring. So was it magic? Was it pharmacology? Historians still argue. You just sit there, fingertips tingling, and realize that even now, you don't quite feel the floor. You chew slowly. The green, sticky lump tastes like pine sap, mixed with old socks, and the texture, somewhere between putty and regret. You sit cross-legged near a Crusader campfire, somewhere in the Levant, mid-12th century. Sand crunches beneath your boots, distant camels grunt, and around you soldiers sharpen blades they haven't cleaned properly in weeks. You're not one of them, though. You're with the cooks, the washerwomen, the merchants who follow war like it's a touring band. You met a grinning man in striped robes earlier. He handed you the lump and said, "Good for fear." You assumed he meant bravery. Now your fingers feel very far away. Welcome to medieval hashish. Made from the pressed resin of cannabis plants, hashish had been used in the Islamic world for centuries by the time European crusaders arrived in the Middle East. But back home, no one had words for it yet, not really. Wine, yes. Ale, certainly. But this was something else. You lean back, watching the fire twist into slow, golden spirals. Someone's playing a stringed instrument nearby, maybe an oud, though to your ears, it sounds like rain. A knight stumbles past, sword dragging behind him. You grin. His boots are on the wrong feet. Historical records are thin, but there's evidence that some crusaders did try local medicinals either out of curiosity or sheer desperation. They encountered poppy syrup, exotic brews, and yes, hashish, usually in the form of candies, pastes, or little green cakes. Not exactly a battlefield snack, but perfect for a long, nervous night in camp. Here's the mainstream historical fact. Cannabis had long been part of Arabic medical and recreational life, especially in Persia and Egypt. Physicians like Avicenna even mentioned it as a treatment for headaches, melancholy, and digestive woes. Though fun fact, it also made the list of things likely to cause laughter without reason. And the quirky tidbit, the legendary Hashashin, an order of Nizari assassins, were said to consume hashish before carrying out secret missions. Some scholars now believe this was just propaganda spread by their enemies, but the names stuck. Assassin and Hashishin still echo across centuries, baked together in myth. You lie back. The stars above are incredibly close, like stage lights, and the crackling fire is muttering something you don't quite understand. The edges of your thoughts feel soft like fabric. Everything slows, even the night. One crusader nearby, face half wrapped in linen, tells you he met angels after eating the green cakes. Another claims he saw his mother floating above a well in Jerusalem. She was knitting, he whispers. I don't even know how to knit. Historians still argue whether hashish truly spread into Europe through returning crusaders or whether it remained an Eastern delicacy for centuries. What's certain is that many came back with stories that didn't quite fit into church sermons. And for those who did bring it back, its fate was, well, hazy. Some scholars suspect it was quietly adopted into courtly medicine. Others think it was dismissed as dangerous foreign devilry. But tonight, beneath the desert sky, none of that matters. You're floating just above your bedroll. Not flying, not dreaming, just hovering in that sweet in-between where war, hunger, and homesickness dissolve like sugar in tea. The fire flickers and suddenly you understand something about time, or fate, or maybe how camels work. Hard to say. The camp murmurs around you, the stars keep pulsing, and you think briefly, wildly, that you could reach out and pluck the moon like a fruit. The buzz will fade by morning. Your mouth will taste like burnt rope. The man with the striped robe will be gone, and you'll wonder if he was ever really there. But tonight, under the influence of something far from home, you've stepped outside of time. And for a moment, the war stops. The mead sloshes thick and golden in the carved wooden cup. It smells of honey, wild herbs, and something a little sour, maybe thyme, maybe mushrooms. You lift it slowly, trying to keep your hand steady, but the firelight makes the rim blur and bend like heat waves. Someone hands you a second cup before the first is even empty. For Odin, they grin. You're in a smoky longhouse in the Norse world, somewhere cold, definitely loud, and absolutely packed with bodies. A feast is underway. Roasted meat crackles on spits. Musicians hammer out a frenzied rhythm on drums and lyres. People laugh like they've never had taxes. And the mead, it's not just for toasting. It's for talking to gods, to ancestors, to the wind, if that's who answers. See, medieval mead wasn't just a sweet, fermented drink. It was often infused with herbs, fungi, or roots. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes because refrigeration was a big barrel of wishful thinking. And what you got was a brew that didn't just warm your belly, it rewired your thoughts. Mainstream historians agree ancient and medieval European drinks weren't just alcohol-based, they were pharmacological experiences. Juniper berries, mugwort, yarrow, even psychoactive mushrooms occasionally found their way into the brewing process. Not always by design, but often embraced once discovered. Quirky tidbit. Some sagas mention warriors who drink the wisdom of Kvasir, a mythical mead brewed from the blood of a murdered poet. It gave drinkers the gift of speech poetry or prophecy. You'd probably settle for not tripping over your own feet. You take another sip. The room stretches. That guy across the table. He looks familiar. Weren't you just talking to him an hour ago? Or was it a week ago? Time's gone sideways. The harpist's notes now spiral out like golden birds. Someone's singing, but it's in Old Norse, and your ears seem to be translating anyway. Nearby, an old woman leans in and tells you about a vision she had last winter. The wind spoke Latin, she says. Then it snowed bees. You nod like this makes perfect sense. Historians still argue whether these visions were spiritual medicinal or just enthusiastic overconsumption. But in this space, half myth, half meat smoke, it doesn't really matter. The mead changes things. Not just your perception, but your access. You look down into your cup and see movement. Not reflections, actual movement. A little figure paddling a boat across the honeyed surface. When you blink, it's gone. Or maybe you are. Outside the longhouse, cold air hits you like a slap from Thor himself. You stagger toward the trees, guided by instinct or hallucination, it's unclear. The forest crackles with unseen energy. The moon hangs too close. You hear laughter behind you and ahead of you, and somehow under you. You sit against a tree and breathe. Your thoughts unwind. The trees whisper secrets, nothing scandalous, just very old. The bark smells medicinal. You lick it. Bad idea. But now your tongue is numb, and the stars are moving in circles. You hum a tune you don't remember learning. And somewhere in the swirl, you realize this isn't just about celebration. It's about transformation. Mead was taken before battles, after funerals, during marriages. It loosened the tongue and the spirit. Sometimes that meant sloppy kisses, other times divine messages. Tomorrow you might not remember all of this. But for now, the mead talks back and it's saying things your sober brain could never hear. You bite into the bread because you're starving. It's rough and dark, made from rye flour, and barely baked in the smoky hearth of a peasant cottage. It tastes fine, maybe a bit sour, but it's food, and you haven't eaten since dawn. An hour later, your hands start to twitch, then your jaw. Then the shadows near the door begin to move. You're not alone. This is the tale of ergot, the sneaky fungus that turned humble rye into a hallucinogenic nightmare, and possibly one of the strangest accidental highs of the Middle Ages. Out in the damp fields of medieval Europe, especially during wet summers, a purplish black mold would grow on rye grains. Nobody recognized it for what it was. It blended in, got milled into flour, and baked into bread. People didn't taste the difference, but they sure felt it. Ergot contains alkaloids chemically similar to LSD, which means if your bread was unlucky, so were you. Mainstream historical fact: outbreaks of St. Anthony's fire, a mysterious disease that caused convulsions, gangrene, hallucinations, and death, were later traced to ergot poisoning. Entire villages would be afflicted at once, with people writhing, clawing at invisible things and babbling about devils. The quirky bit: some medieval sufferers claimed they saw angels hovering over fields or rivers of blood running uphill. Others danced through town with their eyes rolled back, convinced they were floating. One 9th century report describes a monk who tried to baptize a pig because it glowed with heavenly light. And historians still argue how much of medieval mysticism, those visions, those sudden outbreaks of holy fervor, was rooted not in divine revelation, but in some very bad bread. Back in your little cottage, things are going sideways. Literally. The ceiling sags, the walls breathe, and you're pretty sure the spinning wheel in the corner just winked at you. You lie on your back and watch smoke patterns crawl across the rafters like snails made of shadow. People didn't always link the sickness to bread. Some blamed witches, others blamed saints or demons. The church even had special orders like the Hospital Brothers of St. Anthony, who cared for victims and offered relics to ease their suffering. Did it help? Not really. But the bread kept getting baked. You roll over. Your legs feel like molten wax. A boy outside is screaming about fire ants in his skin. An old man strips naked and runs into the woods, claiming he's being chased by birds made of teeth. Not your average Friday night, but in smaller doses, something else happened. A kind of dreamy, disconnected clarity. You see yourself from a distance. You smell colors. The hearth pulses with warmth that reaches inside your bones. You laugh, then cry, then laugh again. And here's the eerie part: some folks liked it. Not the pain, not the seizures, but the altered state. There are scattered accounts of mystics and ascetics seeking that clarity, even if it meant risking the sickness. Some claimed it brought them closer to God. Others said it helped them see sin more clearly, though that might have just been the rat sitting on the windowsill judging you. The symptoms fade by morning mostly. Your head throbs and your arms are dotted with bruises you don't remember earning. The bread sits cold on the table, only half eaten. You swear you'll never touch it again. You do. Everyone does. Because it's cheap and filling. And in the Middle Ages, you don't throw food away. And so across Europe, generation after generation, peasants danced unknowingly with one of nature's most unpredictable highs, never realizing that their dinner could just as easily be a doorway. Your feet are bleeding. Not metaphorically, actually bleeding. You've been walking for days, maybe weeks, on your way to Canterbury, or Santiago, or Rome. You don't even remember anymore. The dust has filled your nose, your mouth, and your soul. Every bone aches like a cursed relic, and that's when you meet her. A veiled abbess with hands like parchment and eyes like warm milk waves you into the cool shade of a cloister. She says nothing, just lifts a small earthen cup to your lips. You drink. The taste is bittersweet with a sleep of floral edge. Almost like tea, but heavier, like it's pulling you down. You blink. The world goes sideways. Welcome to Pilgrimage Potions, the subtle art of medieval travel medicine with a twist. What you just swallowed. Most likely a syrup or tincture made from Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy. Monastic infirmaries and roadside hospices along major pilgrimage routes were known to keep poppy-based concoctions on hand, especially for pain, sleeplessness, or spiritual disturbances. And if the monks were feeling generous, a spoonful could turn a blistered journey into a celestial float. Mainstream historical fact. By the 12th century, opium was well known across Europe, having arrived via Arab medical texts and Greek traditions. Physicians like Constantine the African praised its powers. Apothecaries sold it as theriaca or diacodium, often mixed with honey and herbs to mask the taste and smooth out the effects. And the quirky bit. In some places, poppy syrup was reserved for the devout or the dying. Certain orders considered it a last comfort on a holy road. If you'd come too far and had too little left, one cup could soften the passage, whether to the next shrine or the next world. You lean back against the stone wall. The cloister's arches stretch impossibly tall now, like the ribs of some ancient cathedral whale. Wind hums through the corridors in perfect harmony. A pigeon lands beside you and bows like a monk. You nod respectfully back. Historians still argue whether medieval pilgrims understood the full effects of these brews, or if they simply trusted the hands offering them. There's little doubt many believed the warmth and weightlessness were signs of divine favor. As you sit, a nun gently lays a damp cloth over your eyes. The scent is lavender, but beneath it lingers something deeper. Poppy, maybe. Or time. And you drift. You're walking again, but now you're gliding over the earth instead of trudging through it. You pass fields of golden wheat that nod in rhythm. Hills roll like waves. Every church bell rings just as you step past its threshold. This isn't heaven. It's the road itself transfigured. And here's something strange. The abbess returns, though you never saw her leave. She whispers, "You're closer than you think." You smile. Your lips are slow to obey. Somewhere in this dreamy haze, you realize you've walked 10 more miles without standing. The town is near, or is it far? Hard to say, but it no longer matters. Because in this moment, dosed with sacred syrup held by ancient hands, you are not just traveling through the world. You are traveling above it. The room is dim and sweet, with the scent of burning fruitwood. Carpets smother every surface, walls, floors, even the ceiling droops a little with embroidered fabric. You sit cross-legged on cushions, too soft to leave watching a glass bowl bubble and breathe. The man beside you, draped in silk and smiling like he knows 10 secrets he'll never tell, hands you a long carved tube. You inhale, deeply. The smoke is warm, syrupy, and earthy, tasting faintly of grapes, honey, and something harder to place like dreams caught in amber. The effect, not instant, but steady, heavy, gentle. You feel your body begin to melt. This is the Nargile ancestor of the hookah, and you're in a Persian courtyard in the 11th century under stars that refuse to stay still. Long before tobacco took over Europe, medieval Middle Eastern societies were experimenting with vapor. These early water pipes were used not just for tobacco, which hadn't arrived yet, but for burning various herbs, resins, and sometimes bang a cannabis extract blended with other botanicals. Mainstream historical fact: cannabis was widely used in medieval Islamic medicine and culture, especially in Persian and Central Asian regions. It appeared in medical texts, poetry, and recreational life, often ingested as a paste or inhaled in communal gatherings like this one. You lean back. Your limbs forget their names. The man with the pipe starts quoting Rumi, though the words don't matter as much as the rhythm. They pulse through the air like music without notes. And the quirky tidbit: some travelers claimed that holy men in distant lands smoked tamarind-blended cannabis while discussing the shape of the universe. One Sufi mystic allegedly used hash-infused incense to induce spiritual ecstasy, claiming to converse with birds, and once with a loaf of bread. Historians still argue whether these communal smoke rituals were seen as spiritual communion, medicinal therapy, or just polite decadence. You reach again for the pipe. It feels heavier now, like it's made of sleep. The bubbling water below makes soft, gurgling noises like a baby dreaming underwater. You inhale again. Time loosens. Your thoughts no longer march, they drift cloud-like. A mosaic above you seems to shift. The birds in the pattern flap their tile wings and fly slowly around the room. Someone laughs, or sings, or both. A young woman offers you dried apricots and rosewater sweets. You chew slowly, the flavors unfolding like memory. For a moment, you're convinced you've always lived here, always known this taste, this smell, this softness. The host speaks softly about the breath that touches God. He describes smoke not as escape, but as invitation, a way to dissolve ego and hear the music behind silence. You nod. Of course. That makes perfect sense. Outside, bells chime. Or is it wind in the citrus trees? You can't be sure. And yet, even in this haze, you feel something sacred threading through the space. Not dogma, not ritual, just stillness. Depth. A 1,000-year-old understanding that sometimes when the body quiets and the senses bloom, something bigger has room to whisper. You lie back, arms wide, smiling at nothing in particular. The stars above the courtyard wheel slowly through an indigo sky, as if they too are part of the circle, dizzy, warm, and full of quiet truths. The door creaks open with the groan of 1,000 experiments. You step into the alchemist's workshop, and it smells like burnt cinnamon vinegar and a hint of roasted rat. It's cluttered, of course. Shelves buckle under jars filled with cloudy liquids, pickled organs, feathers, powders, and things that probably used to be frogs. The alchemist's balding, ink-stained eyes, wild with curiosity, beckons you closer. You want to see the divine vapor, he whispers, as if the walls might be listening. You nod, trying not to knock over a suspicious beaker labeled "Do not inhale again." He heats a coiled glass vessel over a low flame. The mixture inside bubbles gently, something yellow, something oily, something that smells like peppermint and regret. As it steams, he hands you a funnel-like tube connected to the alembic's spout. Breathe deep, he says. You do, and suddenly you are nowhere. Welcome to medieval alchemy's stranger side, where science, magic, and altered states lived in the same cramped attic. By the 13th century, alchemists across Europe and the Islamic world We're experimenting not just with metals and potions, but with vapors. Inhaling them wasn't necessarily the plan, but it happened. Mainstream historical fact, Arabic and Latin. Alchemical texts like those of Jabir ibn Hayyan Geber mention sublimation, transforming solids into vapors as a core part of transmutation. These weren't just lab procedures, they were spiritual metaphors. Some practitioners believed that inhaling the sublimed essence of a substance might elevate the soul or at least make your Tuesday weirder. Inside your skull, fireworks bloom. Not actual ones, but patterns of color that ripple like oil on water. The shelves around you bend inwards. Your body feels like it's being distilled thought by thought into something purer, thinner. Quirky tidbit. One 14th century alchemist claimed he could trap the life force of gold in a vapor and inhale it for wisdom. He also died shortly after, but not before scribbling something about talking lions made of time. Scholars still don't know what that means. Historians argue whether these vapor experiences were intentional mystical quests or just accidental exposure to mercury, arsenic, and lead. Most likely a bit of both. The alchemist beside you is now chanting under his breath. It's Latin or Greek, or maybe just vowels in no particular order. His hands trace symbols in the smoke. And you're light. Floating above the cluttered bench, watching your own body like it's a curiosity on the shelf. You see a diagram of the 4 elements drawn on the wall: earth, air, fire, water. But now they move. You understand what they're trying to say. You blink. You're back. Sort of. You sit up slowly, head buzzing like a wasp's nest made of honey. The alchemist grins. "Did you see it?" he asks. You nod. You did. You're just not sure what it was. He offers you a pear soaked in wine. To come down gently, he says. You take a bite. The room steadies. The rat in the corner gives you a knowing look. In this dim laboratory, the line between chemistry and mysticism evaporates like vapor off a crucible. You realize that for these early experimenters, the body was part of the alchemical process. You weren't just distilling gold, you were distilling yourself. And maybe, just maybe, this vapor wasn't meant to transform the world at all. Maybe it was just meant to transform you. The root looks vaguely human. 2 stubby arms, 2 stubby legs, a twisted body pulled from the soil like some cursed doll. Dirt clings to it like memory. The apothecary holds it aloft with iron tongs and mutters something that might be Latin or a warning. "This is mandrake," he says. "You don't pull it, you trick it." And with that, he ties the root to a black dog. You're not sure what's happening, but you step back. Everyone does. The dog is coaxed to run. The rope jerks taut. The root yanks free and screams, a long, shrill, impossible sound that cuts the air in half. You don't hear it with your ears so much as feel it behind your eyes and your spine. Everyone flinches. The dog bolts. The apothecary grins. Welcome to the madness of Mandrake, the root so legendary it came with its own scream warning label. Mainstream historical fact. Mandrake mandragora officinarum was widely used in medieval medicine. It contains scopolamine and hyoscyamine, powerful tropane alkaloids that can cause sedation, hallucinations, and delirium. It was used as a painkiller, anesthetic, fertility charm, and yes, sometimes to speak with spirits. You watch as the apothecary shaves a sliver from the still twitching root. and drops it into warm wine. He hands you the cup. "Just a sip," he says. "Unless you want to dance with the dead." You sip. The bitterness spreads across your tongue like moss. A warmth follows, then cold. Your heartbeat feels unusually loud. The candlelight blooms into golden halos. The air thickens. You blink. The apothecary is gone, or doubled, or upside down. A raven perches on the ceiling, which seems completely normal. Quirky tidbit. Some texts recommended harvesting mandrake only under a full moon, after drawing a magic circle around the plant and chanting for protection. Other guides suggested sacrificing a dog, though some scholars suspect this was metaphorical. Others not so much. Historians still argue whether the mandrake's scream was part of the hallucination, a tale to scare off casual foragers, or a symbolic representation of the root's power to pull forth souls. Regardless, people took it seriously. You're floating now, not up, but inward, deep inside your own mind. Images spool like old film, a field of mirrors, a bleeding clock, your childhood dog speaking perfect Latin. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a cough full of stars. You remember tales of witches using mandrake in love spells or kings ordering it imported by the cartload for fertility. Some women wore pieces of the root around their necks like holy relics, little human-shaped charms that smelled like grave dirt and promised impossible dreams. You wake up on the floor of the apothecary's shop, head on a bale of dried chamomile. You're shaking, not from fear, but from the sensation that you were somewhere else. The root now lies quiet on the workbench. No more screaming, just a dry little tangle of myth and chemistry. The apothecary hands you a cup of broth. "You're back," he says. "Mostly. And maybe you are. But a part of you is still walking through that mirror field hand in hand with something that looked like you, but taller. Mandrake didn't just knock people out. It took them somewhere. Sometimes they returned, sometimes not quite whole. You sip the broth. Tastes like rosemary and relief. The fields roll on forever, and the sun is unforgiving. You're hoeing soil that's more stone than earth, sweating through homespun, and trying not to think about your blisters, or your hunger, or the fact that your only reward tonight might be a spoonful of boiled oats, and if you're lucky, a puff of something that makes it all just a little more bearable. You glance up and catch your neighbor pulling something from his satchel, a bundle of dried leaves twisted with resin and bark. He beckons you behind the haystack like it's a confessional booth. You both squat low, shielding yourselves from the wind and from nosy monks. He lights it with a coal from a pocket stove. The smoke rises slow and lazy. He takes a long drag, then passes it to you. This is medieval peasant cannabis culture. Quiet, improvised, frowned upon, but stubbornly alive in the margins. Mainstream historical fact. Hemp cannabis sativa was widely grown in medieval Europe, primarily for rope sails and textiles. But some records, notably from Arabic, Scythian, and later European sources, suggest awareness of the plant's intoxicating properties. In certain pockets of society, peasants and fringe groups experimented with those properties. Discreetly, the smoke hits your throat like pepper. You cough into your sleeve. Your neighbor laughs soundlessly, eyes already hazy. The horizon ripples. The wind feels musical. The soil doesn't look so cruel anymore, it glows. The air smells like ash pine and peace. Quirky tidbit. In parts of the Islamic world, hashish use was already widespread by the 12th century. Travelers returning from crusades and trade routes may have carried the idea, if not the concentrated resin, back home. There are even whispers that certain early European apothecaries experimented with preparing cannabis into salves or teas for melancholy. You and your neighbor lounge under the open sky. The clouds have personality now. One looks like your landlord, but more polite. The hay tickles your neck. Someone hums a half-song in the distance. Historians still argue whether medieval Europeans intentionally got high off cannabis or simply absorbed trace effects while working with industrial hemp. But there are too many side glances, too many folk remedies, and too many suspiciously mellow poems for it to be just an accident. You drift. Not asleep, but not fully present either. The field sways like a cradle. The ache in your back becomes background noise. You remember a tale your grandmother told about a hedge witch who drank nettle tea and smoked green fire to see into the spirit world. At the time, you thought it was nonsense. Now, not so sure. Your neighbor speaks, but his voice is syrupy and slow. You can't tell if he's reciting a prayer or a recipe. You squint up at the sky, and for a moment it feels like the world is winking at you. Just once. Just enough. Later, when the buzz wears off and you're trudging home with splinters in your palms, you'll feel different. Not healed, not transformed, but lightened. And that's the thing, there wasn't a lot of escape in your world. But every now and then, if you knew the right leaf, the right moment, and the right person to pass it to, you could float above it all, even if only for a breath. You arrive at the Abbey gates just before dusk, Robe's itchy stomach empty, and head full of rumors. The monks here are known for their illuminated manuscripts, yes, but also for something more mysterious. They call it angel's breath. You're not sure if it's incense meditation or some kind of divine vape pen. A young brother greets you without words and leads you to a low candlelit room. Incense coils from brass censers shaped like lions. The air is heavy with something floral and bitter, something not quite sacred. Sit, he whispers. You do. This is the quiet ecstasy of monkish highs. A strange spiritual zone where getting closer to God sometimes meant bending your brain just enough to hear him clearer. Mainstream historical fact. Some monastic orders experimented with fasting, chanting, and sensory deprivation to achieve spiritual visions. Certain incense blends used in religious rites included psychoactive ingredients like frankincense, mildly psychoactive, and styrax resin. While not always intoxicating in the modern sense, these rituals could alter perception profoundly. The monk brings you a cup. It smells like lavender mugwort and something sharply metallic like old coins or blood. You sip. Warmth spreads through your chest. Then a sense of widening. Your skin no longer ends where it should. The candle flames blur. Chanting rises softly, vibrating your bones. You are still, but everything inside is moving. Quirky tidbit. Some monasteries, especially in the Alps and southern France, grew and documented plants like henbane, monkshood, and even poppies. Officially, they were for medicine. Unofficially, some entries in monastery journals describe divine storms, angelic melodies, or the breaking of time. Historians are still trying to decode whether these were poetic metaphors or chemically enhanced visions. You lie flat on the stone floor as voices swirl above you like smoke. You see angels, but they aren't winged men with harps. They're wheels within wheels covered in eyes drifting through blackness. You weep not from fear, but from the raw, overwhelming beauty. God, you whisper, is this you? No answer. Just warmth and bells. And the weight of the ceiling pressing gently down like a parent's hand. Historians still argue whether mystical visions described in medieval texts like Hildegard of Bingen's radiant mandalas or Julian of Norwich's revelations were the product of divine contact neurological events or herbal concoctions. The truth might be yes to all three. Hours pass or minutes. You don't know. You rise at some point steadier than expected, your limbs humming. A monk places a hand on your shoulder and whispers, "You're not supposed to understand. You're supposed to feel." You bow. The door opens to the evening stars, cold and sharp. The world has changed. Or you have. Back in your village, the sky is just sky, and the wind is just wind. But you keep hearing the chant beneath all things. Not a drug trip. Not a dream. Something else. Something holy and weird and very, very real. Your boots crunch over pine needles as you follow a crooked trail into the forest. No road signs here, just rumor instinct and the memory of your aunt's warning. Don't go past the black stump on a waning moon. Well, too late. You're heading to a hidden glade where the hedge witch lives. Not the broomstick warts and thunderclap kind, but the herbalist who talks to bees, dries mushrooms in bundles, and grinds spirit salts beneath a lunar window. This is the world of wise women and wild highs, and it smells like elderflower goat and secrets. She greets you barefoot, cackling not unkindly, and sets to work without questions. You're given a cup of something dark, thick, and sweet as molasses, though it kicks like vinegar. You sip, you wait. Mainstream historical fact. Folk healers and herbalists, often women, relied on psychoactive plants like mandrake, henbane, belladonna, and datura in salves and brews. These weren't party drugs. They were serious medicines and spiritual gateways used cautiously and with ritual. Some concoctions were said to induce flying dreams or shape-shifting trances. You sit beneath a willow. The forest breathes. The shadows curl. Then your body lifts. Not upward, inward. The ground pulses beneath your spine. You hear plants whisper in vowels. A crow dives in slow motion. Your fingers feel distant, as though they belong to someone watching you from a century away. Quirky tidbit. Some flying ointments were absorbed through the skin, often applied to thin areas like underarms or, no joke, the mucous membranes down there. This may be the origin of witches flying on broomsticks. The handle wasn't always just for riding. Medieval euphemism, anyone. You laugh, perhaps out loud, perhaps in your mind, as the trees stretch tall and the stars blink very close. The hedge witch hums a song that loops in reverse. She places a warm stone in your hand. It beats like a second heart. Historians still argue whether medieval witches' Sabbaths were literal gatherings, hallucinated experiences, or invented by inquisitors under duress. But the consistency of visions across regions, from flying through night skies to communing with beasts, suggests something more than fiction. The forest folds, the wind becomes velvet. You lie in damp moss that feels like a cradle. Time stops, or multiplies. You exist as bird root and ember, briefly, gloriously, all at once. Later, when your legs can carry you again, you thank her. She gives you a pouch of dried mushrooms and 3 words of advice. Don't look back. You do, of course, and the glade is gone. Just you, the woods, and the strange certainty that something ancient walked beside you. Not evil, not good, just old and curious. The sea smells different this far south, saltier, sharper, full of things that crawl and click beneath the waves. You arrive at a port city where camels kneel beside galleys and the markets hum in 7 languages at once. This is where east meets west, and where you broke, and a little desperate take a job loading cargo for a spice merchant who's not just selling cinnamon. Because tucked in among the crates of pepper, cardamom, and saffron are tightly bound bricks of something more mysterious, opium cakes, dark, fragrant, and very, very illegal in some circles. This is the coastal gateway to smoky highs, where long journeys bring long nights, and sailors trade stories, songs, and soft oblivion. Mainstream historical fact. Opium was known in medieval Europe, especially after contact with Islamic physicians and traders. It was called theriac or laudanum in its later forms, and was used to relieve pain, quiet the nerves, and sometimes induce visions. Though regulated or frowned upon by some religious authorities, it circulated in merchant cities like Venice, Constantinople, and along the Iberian coast. Your boss warns you don't sample the stock, so naturally you do. Not much, just a pinch mixed into a date, then chewed slowly behind a warehouse barrel. At first, nothing. Then the world smooths. No more sharp corners. Just curves, warmth, and a strange golden light that seems to shine from within your own eyes. A dockhand sings in Arabic beside you. You don't understand the words, but you feel them. You nod, smiling, weeping, just a little. He nods back. Quirky tidbit, some medieval apothecaries sold opium extracts under fancy labels sleeping dust, poppy milk, or even dragon's honey. It wasn't just for pain, it was a luxury item whispered about in salons and scriptoriums. Some scribes were known to microdose while copying holy texts, believing it opened the mind to divine clarity. You walk the port at midnight, weightless and warm. The sea laps at your feet, though you're nowhere near the shore. You feel like your body is made of oil and silk, and the stars hum lullabies. A cat rubs against your ankle, or maybe it's a spirit. You don't mind. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of opiates among certain merchant classes influenced early medical treatises, or if those dreamy poetic sidebars in travelogues were the result of more than just good lighting. You wake the next morning on a pile of burlap covered in salt. The merchant frowns. First taste's always free, he mutters, handing you a heavier load than usual. You don't touch it again for now. But the memory of that glow haunts you like a favorite song you can't quite recall. Back home, nothing feels quite as golden. The wind is colder, your thoughts sharper. But somewhere in the back of your mind, there's always a flicker of that distant port, and the dream that tasted like honey and flame. The path ahead grows narrower, not just in the literal sense, though. Yes, you're now ducking through brambles and goat paths, but in the way your options seem to be shrinking. Towns have become wary. Markets don't welcome wanderers like they used to. You're marked somehow, maybe by scent or by the twitch in your eye that says you've seen too much. And that's how you end up here, in a crumbling chapel at the edge of the world, where monks in brown wool chant in tongues older than Latin. They don't ask your name. They just hand you a bowl of something warm, bitter, and strange. This is the monastic high wrapped in silent shadow and scripture. You drink. Mainstream historical fact. Many monastic orders cultivated plants for medicinal and ritual use, including psychoactive ones. Benedictine and Cistercian monks were especially skilled at distilling herbs into tinctures and spirits, with access to ancient Greco-Roman texts that mentioned poppy mandrake and even cannabis. They experimented, documented, and preserved methods long forgotten outside cloister walls. You sit beneath a stained glass window, the light falling in ruby and sapphire squares across your robe. The chant fills the room like fog. You don't notice when the syllables stop making sense. Then again, maybe they never did. Your pulse slows, your hands tingle, the walls seem less solid. A hawk watches you through the glass, but somehow from inside. Quirky tidbit. Some remote abbeys were rumored to use mild hallucinogens during fasts or vigils to induce visions of angels, saints, or divine patterns. One surviving prayer book includes marginalia that may actually be trip reports. Saw fire crown over Brother Tomas's head. Stars danced on altar. Tasted blue. You laugh under your breath. The monk beside you smiles like he's been waiting for that exact moment. They take you to the garden. You lie flat in the grass. The clouds swirl into fractals. The sun sings. Historians still argue whether the visions of certain mystics like Hildegard of Bingen were neurological, spiritual, or chemically aided. She described intense, colorful revelations that echo the reports of modern psychonauts. Could some of those holy insights have started in a cloistered greenhouse? Someone presses a stone into your palm. Not the same as before, but close. This one hums quietly, like a hymn you almost recognize. Night falls slowly. Stars bloom like flowers. You begin to suspect the monks know things no one has written down, and somehow you understand them perfectly. The road home, if you can still call it that, winds through valleys that seem changed. Or maybe it's you who's changed. Your shadow's longer now. Your thoughts slower. And in your pouch, carefully wrapped in linen and superstition, are the last remnants of your journey. A few dried leaves, a pinch of gray-green resin, and a tiny carved vial that smells faintly of myrrh and smoke. You're not even sure where you got it, but you've kept it close. This is the final high, and it doesn't come from a marketplace or monk. It comes from you, from what you've learned to make, and what you now dare to try alone. Mainstream historical fact. By the late medieval period, rudimentary alchemy and homespun potions were practiced not just by learned scholars, but by common folk who'd picked up knowledge through trade travel or plain old experimentation. Folk recipes for flying ointments, sleep charms, and mood-altering brews were passed orally and tweaked by region. Many used ingredients now known to be psychotropic, henbane, belladonna, mandrake, wormwood, and fermented honey. You sit alone on a mossy stone near the ruins of a Roman watchtower. Around you, crickets, the rustle of night wind, and the soft hoot of an owl that sounds suspiciously wise. You prepare the mixture slowly. The technique's part of the effect. Crush the herbs. Heat the wine. Whisper the rhyme even if you don't believe it, especially if you don't believe it. The first sip hits bitter, the second sweeter. On the third, your spine tingles. Quirky tidbit, some witch's brews were applied not by drinking, but through the skin, specifically the armpits, temples, or more intimate areas. Why faster absorption? One 14th century text describes an ointment meant to be ridden upon, giving rise to the whole flying broom legend. Scholars debate whether these methods actually induced the feeling of flight or just very intense hallucinations. You lie back in the grass and let it rise in you. Not the euphoria of port opium, not the dreamy sway of monk wine. This is different, brighter, but stranger. The trees shimmer. Time thickens. You hear the whisper of people long dead, some of them familiar. You see your own face younger. You see it older. You see it as bone. And yet you feel safe. Like you've been given a secret, not stolen it. Historians still argue whether medieval vision quests and solo herb rituals were fringe behavior or more common than we assume. Most agree they weren't just for witches and weirdos. Sometimes they were the quiet rebellion of those seeking to feel alive in a rigid world. As the dawn begins, you feel the world returning too soon as always. But something's different. Not your senses. Not the weather. It's you. You've touched something older than kings and softer than saints. And it touched you back. You rise, brush off your knees, and turn toward the path. It's long, you know that, but now you walk it lightly. Word count 175. Wind down 300 words, and now the fire's a low glow. The stars are quieter. Even the wind has softened to a hush. You're back mostly, but traces of those strange herbs and holy wines still cling to the edges of your thoughts like pollen. Your limbs feel heavier now, not from burden, but from release. Like something that held you tight for hours has finally let go. You let your breath fall into rhythm with the quiet around you. This was a journey of taste and smoke, of strange laughter in torchlit cellars and whispered prayers in moonlit chapels. You've stood at the crossroads of science and sorcery, of medicine and myth. You've seen how even in a world of plagues, pitchforks, and parchment people still sought the same thing we do, now relief, wonder, escape, a little peace. And whether it came in the form of a thimble of poppy milk or a pipe shared in secret, those moments mattered. They softened sharp lives. They carved windows in stone walls. You don't need to remember every detail. Let it all drift now like incense curling toward a vaulted ceiling. Just know that you've walked through something ancient tonight, and that you made it back. So for now, don't think. Don't move. Just let your mind stay right here, swaying gently like reeds in river fog. Tomorrow can wait. Sleep well, you little medieval tripper. End of script. Sweet dreams.